Yeah, we're live, Megha.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to wait for a couple of minutes so that we have more people joining in, and then we can start. Okay. So, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this conversation. We're here today with some seriously cool and incredibly talented people from the field of wildlife and conservation. And we're hoping to have a really fun, freewheeling chat with them about their lives and their careers in general, which then will give us a first-hand perspective about what it is like to work in this space. And they're such a diverse bunch of people that I'm hoping that it will give us a sense of all the different things that you could potentially do. If not all, at least a lot of the different things that you could do in this space. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat box, and I will try and address as many as possible by the end of this conversation. So let me first begin with the introductions. Um, our first guest today is Rohan Chakravarty, who is a cartoonist and an extraordinary illustrator. He runs the very, very popular Green Humor that I'm sure a lot of you have seen. And his comics have been used by several organizations for very successful campaigns, and he's won many, many awards. If any of our young audiences today are thinking about career shifts, perhaps you're studying engineering and you're dreaming about elephants, I must tell you that Rohan gave up a career in dentistry to take up cartooning for wildlife. What sort of a dentist he would have been is something that we will never ever find out. But dentistry's loss is wildlife's gain. So welcome, Rohan.
Thank you, Megha. Thank you so much.
Our second panelist today is Bijal Vachharajani. She is an award-winning author and editor, and she has written several children's books, written and edited several children's books, and she's been associated with Pratham Books for a really long time. She was an editor with Pratham Books, and she's one of my favorite people, and I would really like to know her a lot better. If you find somebody in the middle of the road hugging a tree, there's a very high chance that it's going to be Bijal. So please go up to her and say hi. She's a really warm person. Our third panelist today is Puja Mitra. Puja is a conservationist and a responsible travel entrepreneur based in Goa. She's the co-founder and director of Terra Conscious, that offers marine and coastal travel experiences that are conducted in partnership with local communities. Now, she's an incredibly powerful champion of sustainable travel in India, and she's led a national campaign that led to India banning the establishment of dolphinariums. And while dolphins rule a large part of her professional life, her personal life is ruled by her dogs. Uh, we are not very sure that we can have Dr. Vidya Athreya, who is our fourth panelist, joining us today, because she's unavailable and we're not able to reach her at the moment. But Dr. Vishnupriya Sankararaman has very kindly agreed to step in for her. She's her colleague at WCS. So, Vishnupriya, can you turn on your camera, please? Thank you so much for stepping in for Vidya. So Vishnupriya joined WCS as a research assistant after completing her master's in wildlife biology and conservation from NCBS, and she earned her PhD in ecology from Penn State. She studies amphibians and their community structures in agroforests. She's currently on the field in Valparai, and I'm very envious of the fact that she's sitting in Valparai while I'm sitting here in UP. Anyway, thank you so much, Vishnupriya, for doing this for us. And we're really hoping.
Thanks for having me, Megha.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pleasure. Okay, so a little bit about me. My name is Megha Moorthy. I'm the editor-in-chief of RoundGlass Sustain, which is a not-for-profit initiative that tells stories about India's wild world. I grew up between Kolkata and Mumbai, completely oblivious to the natural world around me. And then spent a large part of my life as a newspaper editor. And suddenly, when we set up RoundGlass Sustain, I discovered that there was really a parallel universe that existed right in front of my eyes that I had been blind to. So, and since then, I've never looked back. So that is the journey of how I became a wildlife editor. But we're here today to discuss careers in wildlife. And the idea for this panel discussion really has been triggered by a really wonderful book that Rohan and Bijal have authored. It is called The Great Indian Nature Trail with Chunmun. Oh, yes, that is nice. I like how all of you have it in front of you. And this book is really special because it takes Chunmun, who is a fictionalized character inspired by photographer and filmmaker Munmun Dhalaria, on a journey across India where she travels from place to place to discover not only new species and new habitats and learn about them, but also meet some absolutely fascinating people in the process, and people who are doing very, very different things, in wildlife. For example, she travels to Bihar to the Vikramshila Dolphin Sanctuary, and she meets Miss Aarti, who is Aarti Kumar Rao, and who's a photojournalist. And then she travels to Dachigam to learn more about the Hanguls, and she meets Mr. Nazir, who's a forest guard. And then she travels to Arunachal to learn more about the Bugun Leotichta, and she meets Umesh Srinivasan, who's a wildlife biologist. So it's a long list, but it's a really interesting book, and it has some wonderful exercises and activities that you can do, and you will end up learning a lot more about the wildlife space in the process. And there's a very special exercise authored, I'm sure, by our tree hugger Bijal about how to hug a tree, which I found particularly interesting. And so without much ado, I am going to, before that, Puja is also featured in the book. Puja has a chapter. Both Vidya and Puja are actually featured in the book, and they have a chapter dedicated to them. All really fun chapters. So without much ado, I'm going to now address my first question to Rohan. So Rohan, I briefly mentioned your tryst with dentistry, but I really want to know, how did you realize that cartooning for wildlife was really going to be the career choice for you, and how did you decide that this is it and I'm going to do this?
Megha, I've said this before, but it's a true story and I can't change it. And even the tigress that I keep crediting must be tired of hearing this by now. But it is true that a tigress inspired the conception of green humor. It was the first wild tigress I ever saw. And at the time, I was really dabbling a lot with cartoons, really not finding my feet. And I was frustrated with dentistry. And when this connection happened, me staring into the eyes of this tigress, that is a moment when the idea within me sparked that I can actually draw about wildlife, because A, it is needed, and B, nobody else was doing it, at least back then. Now, of course, there are 50 to 100 others, stiff competition everywhere, but back then nobody else was doing it, at least in India. And that's when I thought of starting green humor. Of course, it took its own sweet time. It took another 5-6 years for me to develop it into that idea into something meaningful and find publishers for it. But that was the conception of green humor. Having said that, I also want to add, Megha, that I have to acknowledge my privileges. It does sound very heroic that I gave up dentistry and I plunged into cartooning, but it didn't come without my privileges and without the fact that I could afford to take risks and fail a few times. And I wouldn't really, I don't look at it as a heroic decision at all.
So it had nothing to do with you being a questionable dentist.
Oh, yes, a lot. The less I speak about my dentistry credentials, the better it is.
Okay, so Pooja, tell me a little bit about your growing up years. Did you always know that you wanted to be an ecologist? And also, very interestingly, how did you? I mean, did your love for travel come first, or did your love for for wildlife come first? And how did you decide that you're going to marry these two and build a career for yourself?
Thanks, Megha, and thank you to Rohan and Bijal, first of all, for covering the work I do in Goa and being featured. Rohan knows that he's a big favorite of mine, and I'm relentlessly posting whatever he shares. Because I do believe that the way we communicate about these issues is so critical. So actually, I've had a very mixed sort of journey to where I am today. I grew up in Bangalore. Again, not much exposure to wildlife, didn't know much. Started doing some volunteering for local organizations, which is when I got into working with an organization that was working on captive elephant welfare. And that's how I started learning some of these issues. And then I worked in the Northeast on conflict, etc. But really, I thought I'd pursue a career in communication. So I've actually got a communications background, and I wanted to be an environmental journalist. And somewhere along having got this experience and chance to work with these organizations, I realized that there was a lot that one could do or at the field level, which wasn't necessarily from an ecology perspective. So I'm not an ecologist. I'm actually a person who's done a BA in media, and I have a master's in conservation management, really. So it's more the kind of overall project sort of focus. And I did the campaign that you mentioned in the introduction on banning of dolphinariums in India. And at the time, digital media wasn't such a big platform as it is now. So we actually ran that campaign with print media. And I had to do like 100 media calls a day. And I was talking to journalists all over, from Lucknow to wherever, and really found that marine was something really, not on people's radar. They were very aware of tiger and why there should be forest conservation and trees, etc. But the fact that India had dolphins or that captive dolphin keeping is not correct, these were all like zero concept around it. So I found that very interesting, and we were lucky with the campaign. It worked. It really picked up momentum because it was something different that was being talked about. And then I was living in Goa at the time. I just moved there, and I discovered that there was a tourism industry on wild dolphin watching, which was also existing, which was 15 years old and actually regulated and marketed as water sports. So it was very interesting to me that the dolphin, being a Schedule 1 animal, same protection as the tiger, and while we have so much activity around tigers regulated strictly, dolphins seem to just be incidental to the experience. So that's what got me really interested in how can we talk about this? How can we build better practices to reduce stress on this animal and improve the livelihood of the person engaged in it? Because many had come to it because fishing was falling as an income. Goa is a known tourism destination. This was obviously being promoted as another way to earn an income. But there was no capacity being built, no information being shared. And the tourists also, many who I interviewed during our surveys, basically turned around and said, hey, from the beginning of the trip to the end of the trip, my knowledge is the same. I don't know anything about this animal. So that was really interesting to me. And I was working with WWF at the time. I was running the state office, and we did this study. But when we did the capacity building for the boat operators, I realized that there was a real gap over here in terms of how travel marketing is done in India, how market linkage is built for wildlife-based experiences, eco-based experiences. And if you're not in a protected area, like a national park, there's very little control over how that messaging is going out and how that expectation is being set. And I didn't think at that time institutional organizations, large wildlife organizations, were focusing so much on the market part of it, which, of course, today, social ecological approach is all the norm as it should have been, 50 years ago. But anyway, we've gotten there. So here we are now, where I decided that, okay, let me set up my own real venture, which was Terra Conscious, like a social enterprise. And let's really put our money where our mouth is, because often projects get funded and we get to go and talk to a community and say, oh, be sustainable, do it this way, do it that way. But we have very little accountability in actually delivering that result for them. And many of us are not trained also to think about these steps. You might think ecotourism is a great sustainable livelihood and it's a way to bring income into communities and champion culture and local diversity. It all sounds very good on paper, but how do you actually sell a trip at 2,000 rupees a head and convince someone that what they were paying 300 rupees for is worth paying 2,000 rupees for, because now it's knowledge based and it's better for the animal, it's better for the community. So that's when I started Terra Conscious. And for the last 7 years, we've been focusing on building this market linkage for the community, sensitizing people who are visiting, hotels, the government on policy. And I really discovered this gap is there for marine and coastal tourism all across India. And we also run impact projects, which are on building a marine wildlife stranding network in the state. But really, my curiosity got sparked with how can we make business, livelihood, and conservation, which are all, these are inescapable truths and realities. Governments will develop, societies will evolve, income needs will change, aspirations of communities change, people change, urbanization has an influence. So we really can't divorce conservation from these things.
Absolutely.
And over romanticize it. I think I try to keep my work as rooted as I can in all these realities. I'm still learning. I don't think we have any perfect answers, but yeah, that's how I'm here today. And thank you so much for the opportunity.
Wonderful story. Wonderful story, Puja. Vishnupriya, tell us a little bit about your journey into the space of wildlife and conservation, and how did you decide to study amphibians? How did you make that choice as well?
Yeah, I think listening to everybody else's story, sorry, before I continue, can everyone hear me and see me clearly?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, okay, good. So, yeah, I feel like having listened to all these interesting stories, mine's much more straightforward, no meandering twists and turns, no serendipitous aha moments. I think from the age of 10, I knew my life had to be about the wilderness. I didn't know what that looked like or what form or shape that could take, but pretty early on, I recognized that whatever it was, it had to be in the wild. And by 14, I was like, okay, Nat Geo maybe. Because although I grew up without a TV, and didn't really watch Nat Geo like other kids, I just knew that
did you go out
other
and
people
into the wild very often? Is that how you discovered that you liked the wild?
Yes. So actually what happened was, I think I was just going to come to the fact that it was a lot of people around me and, family decisions also, like other people who just came at the right time and like were mentors and helped me along. But basically what happened was when I was about 9 years old, my dad quit his career in the corporate marketing world and moved to become a school teacher in the Moorthy Foundation School. So I had the privilege of growing up in the wild, and all of our annual excursions were like to a national park or, some sort of wild space. Often groups like WWF would take us out to the field and show us things. So I was very fortunate to have been exposed at a very young age. So, and also when I was about 13 or 14, a biology teacher joined the school and told me there's a master's program in wildlife biology. And she was a graduate of it from WII. And she said, if you really, this is what you want to do, there are ways to do this. And there is a career in this. It's not just some far-fetched dream. So I literally at 13 downloaded the entrance exam to a master program and like went through saying, what can I start studying now? So it was kind of a very straightforward route. All along, I knew that I really liked the sciences. I really liked looking at animals. So it had to be a life where I was getting to study animals. And I think with amphibians and reptiles just came easy to me because I saw them around me growing up. Like any other kid, I'd pick up tadpoles from a pond or a stream nearby, put it in a bucket and watch them swim and then put them back in the pond and things like that. So it was sort of, again, one of those, from early memory, they were just a part of my everyday. They were neighbors, they were just in my vicinity. Just calotuses, snakes, whatever it is, skinks, I would just love. My mom says even when I was much younger, before we moved to a school like this, when I would see a lizard in the neighborhood, I would run after it, even as like a little 3 or 4 year old. So I think herbs just were a natural attraction from a young age. And also the fact.
I think we briefly lost her. But I'm going to ask Bijal the same question, which is how did your love for nature start? And where did you grow up? And how did you decide that writing for nature is what you were going to do, and writing and editing books for children? How did you decide that that was going to be the audience that you spoke to? And why is that so important for you?
Sorry, can
I think
everyone still
Vishnupriya's
hear
back.
it?
Yes.
Vishnupriya,
Let her
yeah,
finish.
sorry. I asked Bijal the next question because we lost you briefly.
Yeah,
But let's
sorry.
hear about the frogs
But
and then I
yes,
can continue.
but yes, absolutely. I think there's a serendipity there, even if you say that there isn't. There's absolutely serendipity.
Right. Yeah.
Was there something else you wanted to add to it?
Yeah, I was just saying all of that was early childhood, but then also through undergrad, I got to do internships in beautiful places in the Western Ghats. And it was fascinating to just see the diversity, because they're far more species rich than people realized until recent times, but also they are very interesting in the ecosystem, the space they occupy, and how little they are studied. We're still kind of cracking taxonomy, which is, okay, which species am I looking at? But they have really cool adaptations, life histories. They are really important in the ecosystem service they provide. They're probably like really good pest controllers and indicators of the health of our ecosystem. So as I studied more and like got more scientific exposure, not just something I ran after as a cool animal, it kind of intrigued me more and more to try and study them, but also try and see what can we do, because everybody, I work in agroforests, which are modified landscapes where we grow tea, coffee, rubber, areca nuts, spices across the Western Ghats. And if you ask, almost every farmer will tell you, yes, when I was younger, you'd hear a lot of frogs in the monsoon. The sound used to be deafening. You still hear them, but they're just not as abundant as they used to be. So, of course, the conservation concern to me kind of also grew along that. So most of my work is applied, where I'm trying to see what can we do about these shared spaces that can make them more sustainable and also help towards biodiversity conservation.
Got it. Thank you so much, Vishnu. Bijal, do you want to answer the question now? Tell us a little bit about your journey and how you started off.
The only journey right now I want to make is either to Valparai or to Goa, because really, right? Like you, Megha and Puja, I've been a city girl. But for me, I think what is very defining about my childhood is that I'm a child of books. I would turn to books for everything, whether in sadness, whether in happiness. And at the same time, my mom would pick up stray kittens, fledglings that needed to be nursed back to health. And so I think these two were really pivotal for me. I would go to Lodi Garden, and while everyone's picnicking and eating aloo paratha, I'd be like, let's go look for fairies and mushrooms, and there'll be fairies under those toadstools. And if we climb a tree, I tried to convince my cousin to teach me how to climb a tree, because I was like, there are magical worlds up there. And it was many years later that I realized that, there are. And it's just that the magical worlds that we see in books are nature, because really birds and the geckos and the spiders that you find on those trees are just magical beings. And it was that belief that got really cemented by the children I met. I worked with Sanctuary Asia's Kids for Tigers program, and you'd have these children who put together a junior tiger task force. When the Sariska crisis happened, they were the ones who would come and sign, like get so many people to sign petitions. They would find people who would walk into their schools with plastic bags. And every time I would meet these children and have conversations with them, I realized that they have what Rachel Carson has always said, that inherent sense of wonder about the natural world. And I started believing in children's power very, very early on, just listening to them, talking to them. And I started making this relation that books are a great way to for children to nurture that sense of wonder, but also to give them tools to imagine a better future. And this really came when we were doing 10-10-10, which was the 350 climate program. I'm one of those people who's like, they say Rolling Stones gather no moss. I've been a journalist. I worked in animal advocacy. I worked in wildlife. You name it, I've like dabbled in that.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized everyone was talking about the climate crisis, and I couldn't understand it because everything was so complicated. So then I went and got a really late master's in it to just kind of understand what is this? What is this future that we are facing? And I came back and I got no job in that. Nobody was willing to hire at that point of time. This was, of course, around 12 years ago. And so then I said, oh, and then a publisher came up to me and said, you've done so much of work with animals and environment and wildlife. Do you want to put that into a book? And I was like, who are you talking to? Me? You want me to write a book, like become one of those magical creatures who create magical things called books? And so I literally fell into it by accident. But I think it's one of those accidents which constantly reminds me that books are such a powerful way to share stories that bring hope, especially in today's world, when it comes to wildlife, when it comes to climate change. And the only people to talk to is what Bittu Sehgal says, the Bacha party, because the Buddha party, that is all of us, are very jaded. But the Bacha party, my God, you start talking to them and they are full of questions. And half the time, I mean, Rohan and I were doing a session with the book in Delhi, and there was one child who always in the audience who'll have the answers before we could ask the question. And so that's what books do. They bring out the magic of nature. And that's how I became a writer, just to pretend to be a magician, really.
Absolutely. I think you are a magician. I think both you and Rohan are magicians, and we need so many more people to do the kind of work that you all are doing. The more, the merrier, really. And I also want to say that, I find it absolutely wonderful how both of you really bring humor to talk about something that is, it's quite a bitter pill, which you so magically feed everybody. So I think that's absolutely wonderful. And you both do it really effortlessly, seemingly effortlessly. So I want to also talk a little bit about the book and ask you a question. I've been thinking a fair bit about careers in wildlife because of this panel discussion, and I was just thinking there's so many different things that you could do within the space of wildlife itself. I mean, there are, of course, communicators, artists, photographers, filmmakers, these days YouTubers, podcasters, nature educators, writers, all kinds of things. Then there are biologists, scientists, researchers, and there are people who are working on ground, like forest officers, wildlife veterinarians, so many different things. And of course, in the travel space, naturalists, guides, travel entrepreneurs like Puja, so many different things that you could do. So when you were thinking about this book, was this somewhere at the back of your mind? And also, how was the entire shortlist process? How did that really work? How did you decide I'm going to write about this person? I'm sure that wasn't easy for either of you.
No, absolutely not, Megha. But a lot of the people who are featured in the book, and a lot of the stories that also feature in the book, by virtue of featuring these people, have resulted because I have either directly worked with them or met them in the field, seen them at work, or have just read extensively about them and been impressed by their work. So a lot of these people I'm yet to meet. For example, Dharmendra Khandil is somebody who I've worked with, but I am yet to meet. And he's used my one of my very early artwork in as a Ghadial conservation campaign poster. So that's how the story happened. But a lot of people like Ipra Mikola, for example, who's this indigenous leader and conservationist from the Mishmi tribe. He has taken me around in the Mishmi Hills when I was trying to look for the Sclatus monal, and I was stuck in a blizzard for 3 days. He regaled me with stories and took me around Mishmi Hills. Then a lot of Umesh is a friend of mine. Umesh and I have done a lot of work together in Eagle Nest, where he still works, I believe. And Nazir Malik, for example, is somebody who I would love to meet, but I've just read about and I've been so impressed by his work and his journey. So all of these people are, inspirational figures. I'm right now reading Margin Lands by Aarti Kumar Rao, and I've always loved her work, especially the slowness that she brings into the aspect of journalism and writing. And I would really love, if 5-6 years down the line, a child picks up the Great Indian Nature Trail, discovers Aarti Kumar Rao through this, and then goes on to read Margin Lands and says, oh, this is the same Aarti. That is the kind of connection I would really love to make with this book.
That's wonderful. There's one question I want to ask all of you, and any of you can choose to answer it, or multiple, many of you can choose to answer it. What is that one thing that you wish somebody had told you before you took up a career in wildlife? Something that you had been prepared for? Very quickly, short answer. Rohan, you want to go first?
I don't really have a career in wildlife, so I don't know if I'm qualified to
It's
answer
a
this.
career in wildlife, Rohan. What rubbish.
But yeah, I think the fact that I mentioned about privilege and about taking risks, I think that is the disclaimer that everybody who already has a career in wildlife should be giving to newbies, because not everybody can afford to take the risks that are needed to be taken to have a career in wildlife conservation.
Bijal, do you want to take this one?
I think I wish someone had told me it's possible, because for me, I didn't know it was possible to do all of these things. I didn't know that I could study frogs, and as a sister would have been petrified, which would have been great fun. Or that, I could study tigers, or, just learn about climate change and make that into a living. And I wish somebody had told me that these are all possibilities, that the thing that you love can become your work, which it still is, because I read and write for a living. But I wish somebody had told me that.
Puja?
Yeah, I think I wish I had been told much earlier that even if you don't do science or you don't not good at maths, you can still have a career which impacts outcomes in conservation. Because for a long time I thought that wasn't an option for me. And I think growing older and being in this space for a while now, I feel something that's really lacking is we don't help people understand how much understanding the political and social challenges around where you're working will influence how the data you're collecting, the ecology you understand, how does that actually work when you want to use it to inform some change or you want to bring about some change. And I think a lot of that is still missing in how we skill people in the space, how we train people in the space, what people get exposed to. And I feel a lot of people struggle when they reach that point, and then they have to deal with all of that, and it gets too much, and you feel burnt out. You feel this is not why I was wanting to do it. Where am I? Not getting time with the frogs or the dolphin, and just running around the forest department or somewhere. And I think that kind of realism is also necessary when you're trained. And I think it's something organizations try to do when people join, but often a lot of your abilities are set by the time you're hired.
Yeah.
So it really depends, what kind of a work system you're being exposed to, what mentorship you're given at work. And we know that, like any other sector, wildlife work is equally plagued with a lot of challenges. And I think for a lot of young people, they're not necessarily prepared for that. And as a individual, I'll just say that we also need to be prepared that just because someone likes animals doesn't make them a nice person automatically. So also to be prepared for what kind of people you encounter in this space.
Yeah,
I
all
think
very,
all of
very
that is
important.
important.
All very pertinent points. And I absolutely, at least the first part of what you said is also very, very important, I feel, because I'm sure we have a lot of young people who are watching this. And I want to also say that, I grew up terrified of science, right? And I'm right now editing a website that does so much around scientific communication and nature communication. So you don't really, and I still shudder when I see too much science. But the whole point is that you can still be part of this world without, without studying science and without that being integral to who you are. Vishnupriya, do you want to very quickly answer that question as well?
Yeah. I think Puja covered a whole lot of what I was going to say, in that I think early on, actually, it was the other way around, where I was running after the birds and the lizards and the frogs, and probably didn't appreciate how much human interaction was important, whether that's engaging with the local community or the forest department or any other actor in the area that I'm working in. And it's something I've built over time and I've learned to appreciate, because yes, those are things that it feels like it might take away from what might be your primary passion, but there's so much growth even through those interactions. That the earlier you invest in that, I think the better you get at it. And it's an important skill set to be able to network and interact with different kinds of people in the landscape. Because if you want to make change at the end of the day, that's the only way to do it, and not do it in isolation. So yeah, those are skills that the earlier you practice it in some ways, the better you get at it, but also you have so much learning and growth and opportunity yourself. Quickly responding to the science thing, I think, unfortunately, the way science is taught in schools is so demonized, whereas science is just asking really cool, interesting questions. Like basically something that sparks your curiosity and going out and finding an answer to that question, right? So that's in response to that. And the last thing that Puja said was also very important that I wanted to highlight on, that not everybody who looks at animals is safe. And especially as a young woman wildlife biologist, I've, like every other woman wildlife biologist, face experiences that no woman should have to face. And I'm so glad we're finally having those conversations. I'm so glad the Me Too movement reached this field in India, and that we're making a conscious effort to make these spaces safer for women.
Yeah, and that was actually going to be my next question, which was that, of course, there are challenges in every, in every sector that you work in, but the challenges of wildlife, especially as women biologists, so people who are working in the field as women, they're a completely different bunch of challenges that a lot of other people may not encounter. How do you circumvent, those situations, and how do you navigate, and how do you make the space safer for other people, right? So very quickly, one of you want to answer that.
Yeah, I think I'll also just add over here that one of the things that we also don't prepare young people for, when, or anyone really, even when you are growing in the industry, is the kind of prejudice that a lot of people have already when they see you as a woman in the space. Doesn't matter what you're doing in the space, just because you're a woman, there's already some level of prejudice over there. For example, I've been asked by government and a government officer in a formal meeting whether my husband likes it that I hang around with boat operators because they're all men, or that I work with lifeguards who are all men, and do I go alone, and does someone go with me, and is there anyone on the boat? And there are all these insinuations that can happen in a formal meeting where you're prepped and you've gone with your policy recommendations or whatever, and you're trying to be a professional in that space, and you're very quickly objectified in that scenario. So I think often preparing ourselves that these are realities you will face, because we do come from a culture which is not prepared to see women in many different roles that today women are, following. And I think one of the other things I feel that we can make it safer, and this is something I've learned by running my own organization and not actually having these conversations in the beginning, because no one had them with me when I was in the field at my stage. But when I started, there's also this error where we want to be, we are privileged. There's so many things we can access that a community member we might be working with cannot. And sometimes you overcompensate. You want to, really be the best relationship you can build and the best equation you can build. And I never set those boundaries for people who were working with me or for myself at the time, because I never knew that I should do that. So I was much more cautious about how we should behave on the boat or with them or in a meeting than what we should also have a boundary as what is all right and what is not okay. And I think when you do work with community, establishing those, and not just community, when you just work with anyone, establishing those boundaries are very important, but especially in a scenario where the power dynamic is so unequal. You're either representing a big institution, or you're coming along with the government representative, or you're there speaking English, and you're, just coming with a lot more information and input into that scenario, and you're driving that narrative because you're saying this is a problem and this has to be dealt with. I think they're also establishing boundaries on both sides, that what is acceptable behavior, what is not, and equipping your team or your colleagues to feel safe enough to talk about that and say, I didn't like the way this person spoke to me, or that happened. And know that that is not incumbent on the result of the project, because people, before they are a fisherman or a boat operator, or you are an ecologist, or I'm an entrepreneur, we are people. And some people are, good, and some have negative thoughts, and everybody is different. And recognizing that individuality of each person you're working with, and not also turning them into some sort of a faceless, tribal community or this. It really bothers me, because when I'm in a lot of conferences or even meetings with fellow colleagues in the space, there's this notion that individuality is for a privileged person, but the community thinks as one. And it's fishers and this, but you not say cartoonists or writers or entrepreneurs. like that's not how we'll be treated. Each of us are got an individual personality and space in it. And I think recognizing and training in your team and equipping yourself with those understandings and those perspectives by reading, by talking to others, having more engagement, learning from others' experience is equally important as knowing a technical skill and how to do some particular action or activity. So I think all of this, together helps you to be safer, helps you to be better prepared, and less thrown when something doesn't go as per your expectations. So I think those things are important.
So the other thing I want to touch upon is that a career in wildlife, no matter which aspect, which area of it that you work in, doesn't necessarily come with big paychecks. It actually doesn't come with big paychecks, not necessarily. It's also very often, it also means long absences from, from the family. It means staying in difficult places with little or no connectivity. So it's not a very easy life that you're choosing. So then I'd love to know that what is the payback then? What makes it worthwhile? Why do a lot of all of you actually do what you do? Do you want to go first, Bijal? I know a lot of this is not necessarily applicable to you, but the basic question about why do you do what you do is, I think, still applicable. The first
children's authors also weigh down the pay scale, so.
Yes, I'm sure that part applies to all of us, but I meant more about long absences from home.
Yeah, actually, I think because a lot of my work is at my desk, I think that is very different. So I do think that one of the things that, and it sounds very lofty in some ways, but I've had children who've come up to me, or perhaps sometimes their parents written to me about how when they read something about, and I've also written about grief and nature, and how it struck a chord with them. Like one child came up to me and said felt seen. And I think for me, everything that I do, no matter what how the book does in the market or anything, it all comes down to the fact that there is a child who felt seen because of what I wrote, and that's what happened to me as one of the most introverted children ever. And I think that for me is often the reason I continue to do. But I'm very curious to hear from both Vishnupriya and Puja.
Yeah, me too. Do one of you want to take it? Vishnupriya, do you want to go first?
I could go. Yeah. So for me, I think it's a born deep joy just being in wilderness, whatever that landscape may be, that just being out there, watching animals, like there is no equivalent to that. And no matter what other hitches come along the way, like for other people, a career choice is a career choice towards an end. Like it's the means to money, it's a means to power, whatever it is. But most people, at least most biologists I've met who really invested years in this career, it's not just a career, right? It's a part of the identity of who you are. It's much more than just a job. I mean, maybe it's not a healthy level of obsession, but it does decide where you live, everything from who you marry, how are you going to have and children or raise them, or like it makes all your life decisions in some ways, because yes, there is a salary ceiling to, even if you grow up to having a PhD, having a higher position in this field, there is only so far you'd grow, and the amount of work you do is not going to be any less than a software techie, right? So you really, really have to every day find joy and meaning and purpose in it. And if you don't, then what are you in it for? And it could be anything. It could be that interaction with the community. It could be a species that you've helped, whose population you've helped recover, whatever it is that gets you joy, but it has to be that born deep joy, because otherwise, when you have the lows, when funding doesn't come through, when forest department permit doesn't come through, when some other hitch happens, when you're not able to get your work done, otherwise you're going to be derailed. So I think that when it is a huge part of who you are and how it defines you, all of this seems peripheral. Of course, it's not easy. I'm not saying this is some kind of party all the time, it's definitely hard. But because you have that at the background, and worst case scenario, you take your binoculars, go out and watch a bird. In the worst of times, you're going to feel better.
At the best of times,
so I think that's
absolutely.
yeah, best of times, worst of times. So I think that's what makes many of us come back to keep doing this, no matter how challenging sometimes it might get. Yeah.
I want to ask a related question, probably to Puja. Puja, what improvement or change do you think that you would like to see in this field, in this space? It could be something small but important, like more toilets, when better toilets for women, and facilities for women in the wild when they're out in the field, or something more systemic. But if there's one thing, 15 seconds, Puja. Sorry, I have to start timing everyone because
in the way you're asking how like organizations function.
It could be a larger organizational systemic thing. It could be about something more field related. It could be absolutely anything, but one change.
Yeah, I think definitely much more engagement between people, let's say people who are working in the development and social justice space and environmental conservation. I think that's something I've always felt a bit of a lack in the field, because we tend to become quite siloed, and organizations also end up hiring like that, and then overall that becomes the network you're part of. So I think that does affect your learning. It affects your thinking around these issues. So what I would like to see is a lot more intersectionality in how we frame and how we plan and how we implement this work, because I don't think any of these issues are divorced from those realities. They're all very much compounded by it. So yeah, I'd like to see a lot more of that exchange.
Okay, Rohan, you want to add to that?
Yes, Megha. Megha, I just want to quickly bring in what happened with the Me Too movement in wildlife, to this. Because, what really acted as a catalyst during that time was Akanksha Sood, who's a known figure. She's seen as somebody who's in high regard, in a position of some kind of power, to be vocal and to be supportive of a community, and that made all the difference. And I think if that is something that people in positions of authority and power in these jobs, in these spheres of work, do take up being more vocal, do take up being more political, and outrightly vocal about their social stand on matters, I think that will make a big difference to younger people and people who feel vulnerable in this as part of these communities, to come out, voice their concerns, and be more active as a community.
Absolutely, completely agree. I want to now talk a little bit about mentorships and inspirations, since it's a conversation about careers. Were there people that you looked up to when you were a lot younger, or when you were just starting out? And were there people who mentored you through this journey? Were you lucky enough to get that sort of mentorship? And how important do you think it is for young people to get a good guide, to get a good mentor? And how can we facilitate more of this? A little bit like Uncle Bikky, perhaps, for Chunmun. How can we facilitate a lot more of these interactions?
Vishnupriya should go first.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Vishnupriya, do
I
you want to
think
go
for
first?
me, it started early, like I said, from school days. So one of my biology teachers and environmental science teacher in my school, actually, she was, I think, Gadakkar's first PhD student in IISc when Center for Ecological Sciences was set up way back in the day. And so having had those early mentors, especially women mentors, come my way and then come and teach biology, environmental sciences in school level was huge, because they not only restricted what we learned to the textbook, but took us out to the field and watch animals, and encouraged us to build a curiosity towards, develop a curiosity towards everything that we watched in the outdoors. And definitely beyond that, I mean, once I started interning and doing early projects during undergrad, different people from different NGOs have really sort of helped me through that process. And definitely having good mentors, and mentors that look like you or don't look like you, all of it, and showing that there is a pathway to you being who you are, finding your space in this field is super important. And I think the more we are able to have those kind of interactions, whether, so, you know, a lot of people do become siloed, but when you have citizen science, am I cutting off again?
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, when you have citizen science approaches where young people are able to participate and come in and do projects with more established people, those are very, very important spaces. You know, the first 1 month I ever spent continuously in the field was maybe Agumbe Rainforest Research Station as a, you know, undergrad, and it changed so much about the way I think about, like, I think that 1 month was a huge turning point in my career, just walking through a stream with a bunch of other naturalists and learning about all of the smaller critters that live in streams was so important to me, which is why, you know, working in freshwaters has ever since been like a through line in most of my research. And I think consistently engaging scientists engaging with everybody from high school to even younger, school level to college level, it's super important because you provide spaces for them early on before they actually enter the career to see that they can fit in here. And yeah, of course, you do meet people who are not natural mentors or are not necessarily easy for young people to work with. But I think in some ways that's a challenge that also kind of builds your resilience then. Because, you know, and if I have stuck it out and I'm here today, it means that, you know, I can work with a
that bone to be built, that muscle to be built, actually. But anyway, I think that's something we've all encountered in. I can give one more person about 10 seconds to answer this question very quickly. Does anyone else want to take this as well? Rohan?
Okay, sure. I'm just quickly going to talk about Bittu Sehgal because we mentioned him earlier in the conversation. He was an early mentor to me, and I really must emphasize on the importance of having this sort of a mentor to everyone, especially trying to enter this field in through a creative direction. So I had the great fortune of publishing some of my earliest works with Sanctuary Asia and having Bittu sir as my editor. And I did this really problematic cartoon about the Tiger Task Force, which depicted Mrs. Sunita Narayan in a very bad light. And he knew from the start that it was going to be a disaster to publish it, but he went ahead with it because he, I think, wanted me to learn my own lesson. And, you know, eventually I did. I did see what the problems were with that cartoon. I took a very ill-informed stance, and I was very juvenile at that stage. But I grew because I made that mistake, and because my editor let me make that mistake at the risk of his own magazine suffering in reputation. So I think I really have to thank him for giving me this chance and for having his faith in.
Super. Puja, this question's for you, actually. I think one of the things that really excites all of us about being in wildlife is that no 2 days look the same. One day I could be on Zoom calls, from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. And on another day, I might be, in Spiti at -30, seeing snow leopards. So what does a day for you look like? Very quickly.
Oh, well, because I work in the marine space, there are very specific days in the year that you can be on the water. Yeah. So 6 months looks very different and 6 months looks very different.
Yeah.
But yeah, typically if we are doing a trip or the firecrackers have started. But if you're taking people out or, there's something happening, then you're on the water, and that's always wonderful to be out and with the dolphins and watching them, etc. Otherwise, typically there is lots of work in any organization to run. I'm sure, as everyone here knows, I think administration takes up a much bigger part of your life than you realize as you get older in the space, or come into positions where management becomes a big part of your task. So I think a lot of my time goes in that. And also in a lot of the networking that we do. And I think I just wanted to add a point to the previous, when we were talking about what we'd like to see as change. One of the things, I was thinking about the mentor question. I think I was lucky because I come from a privileged space where I was able to meet people who were doing work and somebody could recommend and someone knew someone, and that's how it happened. But as I started my own work and I started doing outreach with young people, a lot of young people do reach out to us for volunteerships, internships, etc. I realized that it's so difficult to find out what's going on in wildlife work in India. and where to go and who to ask and what's happening in my state, and who can I go and learn from, who should I learn from. So all of that, I feel, is something even at Terra Conscious we're trying to create this platform where people can actually get access to different resources and find out more about the space and what's happening. So definitely, I think a big part of my time is trying to build those networks and trying to meet people and bring people together. So yeah, that's kind of like what happens in a day, but I don't think any day is really the same.
Absolutely. And that's the whole point, right? I mean, we tend to believe that people who are working in wildlife, they're always, out in the field, they're doing, certain things. But a large part of our lives is also, administrative work, like all of you said, getting permissions from the forest department, doing, regular stuff that can be sometimes a little soul sapping, but it's really important. Okay, so I want, perhaps two of you to go and very quickly tell me two really memorable moments, which, from your careers spanning all these years, which have made you believe that, hey, this is why I do what I do. I mean, just that one light bulb moment where you think that this is it. Is there something like that?
Yeah, I think, I mean, lots of different micro moments and big moments because, different things touch you. But I think something that really made me feel like, don't give up and keep trying. And sometimes even an unconventional approach can work. I'd say one micro moment was, I think, when Rohan featured Sam in the cartoon, which was one of our board partners. And Sam was, I didn't know that was going to happen. I hadn't seen the cartoon before, but Sam was so excited. And just how he felt and what our journey has been over the last 7 years. I think for me, trying to meld these worlds and just making that, amplifying these voices has been something that has been really amazing and keeps you going. And another moment, I think, has been on a trip where I had actually seven German customers who wanted to meditate. So they had all sort of closed their eyes and they were sort of almost napping on the boat. We had been out for quite some time. And there was a pod of humpback dolphins, the Indian Ocean humpback, which is found offshore from Goa, feeding around us, foraging. And suddenly, this mother and calf, I was looking down. So I had my head like this on the side of the boat, and I was looking down at the water, and everyone else was very quiet. And you could hear a pin drop, was so silent. And they both surfaced together, and the mother turned like this and she looked straight up. It was very coincidental that I was looking down, maybe something like your tiger story, Rohan. But I was looking at her eyes and I was just thinking in that moment, how lucky am I that this is my life right now, that I'm here, I'm looking at this, some that both partner is going home with triple what he earns on a typical trip because we managed to convince someone that this is going to work. 7 people are sitting here enjoying this space and going away having learned about it. And I think all of those moments stay with you and make you feel that, okay, I'm not like, running around like a headless chicken. Maybe something I'm doing is working. So, yeah.
Super. Bijal, do you want to quickly take this one? And we are really running out of time. So everybody has to be really, really quick with their answers.
I can talk very fast.
Yeah.
I think for me it was 2019 when I was talking to a group of children who one of them said, I've come to your session because I was sent home. We had to leave the city when the AQI went up to 900. I want to ask, how is despair? And every time even I think about it, I get goosebumps. And Rohan, he'd come for the Delhi launch of the book, and he was like, that was a memorable moment for me. And I think the other was, we were Rohan, Sejal, and I actually got a chance to go to the Nicobar Islands, and this was the first time I was flying over that part of the water. And I think just flying over that suddenly gives you that sense of what do we do to this world? How do you look at something like this sort of a space of water, of trees and island ecology, and think, let's change it, let's conquer it, let's make it something else. And I think that for me was very pivotal as well.
Okay, wonderful. I also have 4 very short, fun questions from the team that I will address to each one of you. So, Rohan, what is the most annoying thing that you hear when you tell people that you're a cartoonist?
Oh, your work is for children.
Okay. So, Puja, what is the most bizarre expectation you've had to deal with from tourists?
if they can touch the dolphin, if they can swim with it, why isn't it jumping out? Yeah, lots of things. I even had a customer who tried to jump in once, or customers who also tell you, but it's only coming out and going back in. Now, how many times is going to do that? And it's like, you're lucky you're even seeing this. But yeah, lots of those kind of, tourist encounters is a whole different article.
Yeah. I had a question
All
about that.
travel, anyone working in any kind of an experience giving space can write.
Especially because you're also working in Goa, where everybody wants to,
Well, you can ask me a
Have a
question
thing.
about what is annoying to be asked about Goa. It's like, do you work in Goa? Isn't it just like a perpetual holiday? And it's
And
like,
then you have to convince them that your holiday is, a fun holiday for you can also be ethical and can also be responsible, where, it just feels like an uphill battle right from the word go.
yeah, I think, and for when I started working in Goa, a lot of people used to ask me, conservation in Goa, there's wildlife there. And I'm like, what? It's part of Western Ghats also. Like, what do you mean? And even then, people were more aware of the terrestrial. So I think for me, really, the annoying questions are all worrying because I'm like 7,000 square kilometers of coastline. How is it that people are just like, India has dolphins? So that's not something you really have to deal with.
Vishnupriya, tell me, you, I'm sure, spend a lot of time out in the field. How does it work? How do you manage to sort of, are there any crazy stories that you have on the field of perhaps, getting calls from the Amazon guy saying, delivery dena hai, madam, aapko. Do you have issues like that? How do you manage, being away so much and yet, managing to stay rooted somewhere?
The Amazon thing recently, my research assistant has had this repeatedly. Every time she goes to our most remote field station is when the Amazon guy calls saying, I have a delivery for you.
Yeah.
But for me, I think the thing that gets most people curious about is, but there are so many leeches and you work at night and isn't it scary? And, it's mostly things like that. Especially very often now, there's so much, all of the landscapes we work in are elephant country, and then we work at night in these landscapes. So even the, plantation owners are constantly like, are you sure this is a good idea? Are you safe? And a couple of them recently offered us a box of firecrackers and insisted we start every day with a firecracker to like keep our trails clear of elephants before we start our frog work every night. So I thought that was interesting that she thought that would keep us safe. Also, if I was bursting firecrackers through my research work, my frogs won't be calling. I'd disturb all of them and not be able to record my frog calls. So, yeah.
Bijal, what is your pet peeve as an author and editor of children's books?
That nobody takes us seriously. We're all like, I think it's always like, so you write for children, but don't you want to write grown-up books? No, I don't. So I think it's just treated, it's looked across at something that anybody can do.
Correct.
And it's one of the most highly skilled book writing in many ways, but very few people recognize that, and then they all just say, but I'm waiting for your novel for big people. Yeah, keep
For
waiting.
your real book.
Yeah, for my real book.
Yeah. Okay. My last question before we start taking audience questions is, again, as people working in this space, very often we see heartbreaks every day and very closely sometimes, especially considering given the times that we are living in. So what keeps you going and what gives you hope? Very quickly. You want to start, Bijal?
Wait, I'm thinking. Go with somebody else first.
Okay, who wants to go first? Very quickly.
I'll go.
Puja.
Okay, I'm just going to give the example of the standing network that we run in Goa. So 7 years ago, before we started it, there was a whale that washed up in Palolem. It was alive and no one knew what to do. Nobody was trained. There was some tourist who knew that I knew my husband who was a diver and called him because something to do with ocean. Maybe you know somebody. And like that, we tried to deal with it and we couldn't. The animal died. It was very chaotic. Today, 7 years later, after we've established this network, there is 550 people, the lifeguards who are trained, who report every case coming on the beach. While I'm talking to you, I'm coordinating on the phone and someone's responding to a seabird or a dolphin. And really, I used to always feel that these big system changes are very difficult, but they are extremely difficult, but they can happen when people decide to work together and come together. And today, because of all that, Goa government has made marine ranges, there's a marine cell, there are forest guards who are trained, there's a marine squad. For 7 years, we've done it. Over 1,000 cases have been addressed. There's another NGO which does the veterinary part with who has come in. And today it's becoming a model that, we can actually show to others. And more importantly, so many animals getting dealt with, so many people becoming aware, knowing that they can talk to this network and deal with it. And I think, to me, that is what keeps you going, because every time something clicks, something works, it just gives you that impetus to, try the next thing and try the next idea. So I think, yeah, that is definitely part of it.
Wonderful.
I think for me, I've realized I've changed this answer over a period of time, and I think what really keeps me going is the sisterhood. Um, I think I'm really lucky to be part of some really wonderful friendships. Ron will give you will give you honorary membership, don't worry. But I think there are people who lift you up, who keep you going when the going gets tough, when you're extremely beaten. Sometimes you've had a terrible day at work, or just like something terrible is going on in the world, and you're absolutely, and then you have this group of friends who will just rally around you, who will talk to you. You can just complain to them. And I think that sisterhood that I have found over the years has really kept me going.
Wonderful. Vishnupriya?
For me, it's been younger colleagues that I've gotten to work with in recent times, going out to field with them, watching them discover and experiencing the journey that I had earlier, and finding that, and watching them have their delight and those experiences. And yeah, it's only been very recent that I am in a role where I can be a mentor too. So watching other people have those experiences that I had as a younger person has been very rewarding and exciting. And every time I watch their learning curve, it gives me great joy and keeps me going.
Rohan, last words.
I'm very short of hope at the moment because of all that's happening around the country. But there's this one instance that always, still to this date keeps pushing me. It's this little cartoon visual that I created during the draft EIA movement about the then environment minister dressed up as a superhero called Clearance Man. And that kind of became so popular on social media, especially no print media dared to publish it. But on social media, it became popular enough to be one of the visual faces of the online movement against the draft EIA, which eventually garnered 6 lakh signatures and pushed the government on the back foot. So things like this can still happen in India if different kinds of people, different kinds of media come together. And that keeps me pushing to do the work I do.
Okay. So now I'm going to just, read out some of the questions that we've got. We've got a bunch of really, really nice questions. I don't know how many we'll be able to take, but I'm going to try. Okay. So, Deepika Sana wants to know, how can someone who's at a mid-career in a non-science background transition into a career into wildlife conservation? Puja, do you want to take that very quickly?
Well, I mean, it's difficult to just answer that generically, and if you don't know what the person's other skills are and what they were doing. But I think what is important to understand is that conservation is not a separate career or a sector like that. Conservation is a belief system. It's a way you practice. You think nature needs to be around you, or you think an animal should have a better chance, or someone who's directly dependent on an ecosystem should have a fair say in how that ecosystem is being used. So I feel really discovering what you can do in your existing skill set and your existing career choices, your passions, and bring in that messaging, bring in that action. So you could be a fashion designer, but you want to do sustainable fashion. You could be a restaurateur, but you want to source, proper sourced food, which is not, poorly produced or unfair trade. You can be a hotelier and run it in a different way. You can be a travel person, run it in a different way. You can be an editor for a magazine and decide, I'm going to, publish more articles on this because I need to build better awareness. I mean, there are lots of things you can do. So I think we need to stop thinking of conservation as a separate thing, and those environmental people will do it. Environment is not a passion. It's a duty working for this because you have to. There's no other choice. If you may be loving a frog or you may be loving a dolphin or a tree, that's a personal choice. But I think if we start believing that making a difference to our environment in which we live and we all depend on, regardless of whether we do it full time or part time or are just, passionate about it in our heads, you can find ways to do it in the space you're in. And if you want to transition into a large institution, I would first say, do your homework and understand, is that really needed? Can you not make a difference through what you're doing? Do you really need to be in some big name institution to make a difference? Is there something happening locally that you can be part of? Are there courses you'd like to learn? Because there's no typical course that will make you a conservationist. It's a mix of skills that you need that make you a conservationist. Like, ecology is one part of conservation. Communication is one part of conservation. Advocacy is one part of conservation. So there's no one size fits all type of training that will automatically make you conservationist. It depends what you want to do. You can be a lawyer and be in environmental and take up more environment cases or social justice cases. You can be a real estate person and say, okay, I'm not going to sell apartments that are built on, wrongfully taken land or whatever. So you can really build it into anything. And I think that's what I would hope to see more in mentorship and training, that we stop making conservation this inaccessible thing, or this 5 organizations only where I can do it, or this is what I should be trained in. I think conservation is problem solving. It's understanding what challenges are happening somewhere, understanding what information you need to know about it, how you can talk to people. There's a bit of psychology, there's relationship building. You can be a counselor and bring that into your work, how our environment influences our mental health, our physical health. You can be a wellness practitioner, doctor, it can be part of that. So I think, or you can just be a concerned citizen who does something, maybe just greens the area where they live, their apartment, their balcony, and 3 butterflies have a better time than, not. So I just feel like, the more we try and first identify what are your skills, what are you passionate about doing, like what you like doing, and then looking at what are the problems out there. Today, there's so much information available at a fingertip if you have access to it. And look at what different projects are running, what different issues are running, and then look at what can my skill set bring to that? What can I bring to that? Then you can find something that will skill you to do it. I'm not saying it's easily available. I'm not even saying it's easily done. I'm saying that's the gap, and all of us need to work together to make those opportunities more available, more visible. But I don't think you need to be a career shift. I just feel you can add and diversify your career and your interests towards conservation if you want to.
Vishnupriya, I think you might want to answer this one. Shweta Katyar asks, how do you mentally or emotionally deal with setbacks in your work? To elaborate, if you're trying to protect a habitat or an animal and it doesn't pan out because of bureaucracy or corporate players.
I think in some ways, failure is a part of that journey. And there isn't an easy answer to that. It is, but it is something you're going to face. And I don't know that that's limited to conservation. No matter what you do in which world you're in, failure is a part of the process that you're going to have. But like I said, that long-term vision, that what you set for yourself doesn't change, right? You feel bad one day, you go to bed on it, you wake up, pull up your socks, and go back to it the next day. Because if this problem doesn't have an answer yet or is beyond your hands, there is another problem right around the corner that still needs you, that still needs people to come together and make a difference at. So, just because some of them don't work doesn't mean the next one doesn't. And yes, this is a field where there are victories are few and far in between, at least big scale ones, but the little ones, the smaller impacts, you have to count your blessings at that scale, I think, than wait for some large, scalable actions and like big, you've stopped a big project, you've saved a species from extinction. Instead of aiming for that, you count your little blessings on each day. You've helped in a much smaller scale, and then so you count on those, and then you feel better, because if you keep aiming, I mean, it's good to have that North Star aim. You should aim towards that, but you have to count your blessings at the smaller scale, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Beautifully articulated as well. Reva Durafe says, as a 16-year-old high school kid, who do I reach out to for internships? Everybody I approached told me that I was too young. Bijal, do you want to take this?
I feel like if internships, there are age limits, even we have age restrictions at our office. go out and volunteer. When I was a teenager, I was standing at Juhu Beach and shouting my lungs out doing street plays because I wanted to do something. I had no idea what to do. So start by volunteering. A lot of wildlife organizations welcome volunteers. Make sure you're safe, of course, and your family knows where you are. Uh, Volunteering, and then go ahead and intern when you are in college and so on. Don't be in a hurry to work. Enjoy, just enjoy the freedom of being able to be a volunteer and learning lots of things. Good luck.
Okay, Sefi George wants to know, as children, how were you taught about the environment? Did you have parents, teachers, schools that encouraged a connection with nature, or was it through textbooks like the majority of people? Rohan, do you want to take that?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that, please?
I will, yeah. As children, how were you taught about the environment? Did you have parents, teachers, schools that encouraged a connection with nature, or was it through textbooks like the majority of people?
For me, it was really never through textbooks. I
Yeah.
mean, I was I actually the connection with nature happened much later in my life, thanks to Kids for Tigers, coming into Nagpur and again through indirectly through Bittu sir, and that's when I started to gain an interest in things like bird watching and nature trails, and then learning myself so that I could take school kids to for bird walks and nature trails myself as a volunteer. So I think that was my connection to nature. I think my school really underperformed massively in building that connection, even though I do credit my school to be very offbeat in the sense that it encouraged a lot of extracurricular activity like inculcating interest in drawing and creative methods of expression. But in terms of nature education, it really lacked credentials. Yeah.
Okay. Krutika Bhave wants to know, what specific skills or experiences would you recommend wildlife professionals focus on to stand out in this field, given the increasing competition and decreasing pay scales? Who wants to take this one?
Vishnupriya, you're the right
Yeah,
person for
I'm
this.
nominating Vishnupriya for this one.
I mean, it is a problem that I don't know if the pay scales decreasing so much as inflation's made everything else more expensive. So yes, it is a challenge, and I think it is it's not a solution that individuals can make. I think we need to redesign how this field works. So much of our work that's happening in institutions, organizations, and things like that, right now, conservation is not looked as a service, a good that we're providing, right, in some ways to the society, but it is, right? Like, it's as important as any other good or service provided by the corporates, but it's not looked at as, so I don't know that I have an answer to that individually, but
Also about skill
can you
building.
repeat the first?
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yes. So so I think there are ways now to pick up specific skills where you can contribute in a way that you can pitch yourself as being important to the workforce here. I think Puja mentioned, you don't have to get deep into this and go through the ranks of intern to research assistant to somebody with a master's or a PhD. And there are so many ways. You be a lawyer, make your money, and then add to it by helping take on cases that need to be fought. You be an architect, go make your money, but help out. Like, I don't know that everybody has to enter the system, because in some ways it is limited, the number of careers within the central wildlife field that there is. So
Absolutely. And I also just want to add that I feel like, there is room for everyone here. It's not, it's not a competition. And I feel there's enough space. If you're good at what you do, if you're invested in what you do, you will find a platform, you will find a space that, and you will be able to carve a niche for yourself and carve a space for yourself. I say that from experience, and I'm sure you all agree. Yashasri Himmat Singha says, I'm a 23-year-old environmental writer and photographer. What are the best ways to land a role as a staff writer or communicator at a publication or research organization? Well, I can talk about publications, definitely. I mean, ideally wait for vacancies to come out and then apply for them. And when you're and also I very often I find that when people apply for positions for jobs, um, you have to tell me exactly how you fit that role perfectly, and you have to make an effort, even in when you're writing a cover letter, to tell me why you are a good fit for this particular job, instead of telling me about your entire life story. And that happens very often. So I think very often, because a lot of organizations get lots of applications every day for jobs, because the job market in general all over the country is looking a little dismal. I feel it's very important that you put your best foot forward and make sure that your applications are taken seriously when you apply for these positions. Does anybody want to add something to that about research or joining research organizations or anything like that? Or publishing houses, Bijal?
I do think what you said is very important. Research what the publishing house does in terms of what they publish, what is the what is the profile, like what are the kind of writers they feature, what are the kind of photographers they feature. Because I think the moment you send something and this it's a mismatch of what their values, what their mission is, they're not going to take you seriously. But if you're able to match yourself to the kind of profile they have, I think that's when you find yourself commissioned more often.
Absolutely. I think there's another question, and this is the last question I'm going to be taking. Mira Dalvi says, hello, everyone. Okay, I think this is the mother. Hello, everyone. This is Arjun. I'm 12 years old and I'm interested in a career on wildlife conservation, and I'm looking for information on how to go about it. I will also be living in Goa soon. So, Puja, you want to address this very quickly and tell him what are the things that he could potentially perhaps do in
Goa
Goa.
actually, interestingly enough, has a lot of ways in which kids can engage with nature. There are groups that do experiences for children. There's nature workshops that happen for kids, and because Goa has a lot of accessible natural spaces to visit, plateaus, riverine areas, beach, of course. So there are people offering intertidal walks. There are plateau explorations. So I think as a young person, whenever you can on a weekend with your family, not and all of these are not very expensive to do. Marine typically is expensive because just being out on a boat is expensive, no? Because it costs something to do it. But there's lots of places to explore and start really building that connection with the environment, even in your own where you live. There's lots of things to explore there. There's lots of microfauna in our homes. Start there. Wildlife doesn't only mean elephant, tiger, and something big and something far away. So I think just building that interest will be good. And as Bijal said, there's so many books that inspire us when we are younger and build that perspective and in our mind. So really read, get access to as many books as you can, because that will help you also figure out how you want to engage in the space as you grow older. I think that's very important. For lots of people, they want to be told how to engage with the space. And I think if you have the luxury of choice, then sit and reflect a little bit and think about how you want to engage in the space. Because a lot of us try to run behind things that we think need to happen. And then we find we're not well suited to it. So it ends up becoming something we can't sustain. So if you do have the opportunity, then think about what would I like to do? Do I like to study animals? Do I like to work with people? Do I want to go and fight for some law? Do I want to, write about it? Whatever it is that you feel, I think it's important knowing how you want to.
I think that's absolutely wonderful advice and a great note to end this conversation on. Thank you all so much for being part of this, and it's been absolutely wonderful talking to all of you, and it's been very insightful. And yeah, I mean, we'd also said that some of the best insights, questions, comments will get free copies of the book. So we will announce those next week on Sustain's social handles. So, be on the lookout for that. Thank you all so much again. It was absolutely wonderful. Bye-bye. Take care.
Thanks so much, Megha. You've been terrific throughout this.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you
Oh,
so
God.
much.
Thank you.
Wonderful
Thank
opportunity.
you.
Thank you. And lovely to meet all of you and to meet you also, Vishnupriya. And hope to learn more about
Likewise.
your work.
Absolutely, and special thanks to Vishnupriya for joining this conversation at the last minute and being so insightful and wonderful. In it. Thank you so
And
much.
also my apologies, the power has gone here, hence the look of the video.
That's perfectly all right. You're glowing in the dark.
With the torch on my face so that you can see me. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.